normally like covering new games if it can be avoided. I hate the hype and the pissing match to be the first one out the door with a review. I like waiting until after the dust is settled when people aren't looking for a purchase recommendation or a review score and we can have an open and honest discussion about whether or not the game was any good. But in Deus Ex's case, I think I'll make an exception.
Spoiler alert! This review is likely to include spoilers on one or more of the following: plot twists, betrayals, deaths, conspiracies, levels, locations, weapons, abilities, and plot holes for Deus Ex, Deus Ex Human Revolution, and Deus Ex Invisible War. Viewer discretion is advised.
That out of the way, let's dig into the mechanics. The original Deus Ex enabled a variety of playstyles, but it did them all in a shallow manner. It allowed for a stealthy approach, but not as well as Thief. It facilitated run-and-gun combat, but not as well as the likes of Half-Life. It offered RPG mechanics like a leveling up system and the ability to talk your way out of situations, but not as extensively as Fallout. But what it lacked in the kinesthetics and depth of those titles, it made up for in the way it facilitated all of those approaches concurrently. And just like its predecessor, Human Revolution pulls popular tropes from contemporary games in order to facilitate a wide variety of play. Except instead of pulling from Thief, Half-Life, and Fallout, it's pulling from the likes of Splinter Cell, Arkham Asylum, Gears of War, Call of Duty, and Mass Effect. The gunplay is a more lethal, stop-and-pop affair where neither player nor enemies can take much damage. The stealth is less about complete avoidance and pattern recognition of years past, and more about staying out of sight long enough to perform a quick takedown. And the RPG elements now reflect a minimal number of stats and a bigger emphasis on choice in an open-world environment. Unlike the original Deus Ex, however, a lot of these mechanics are actually pretty good. Where shooting, stealth, and RPG stat management was clunky at best 10 years ago, we now have a set of mechanics that are refined, polished, and above all, kinesthetically pleasing no matter what your chosen playstyle. Do you want to wait patiently in the shadows and then silently take somebody down? Yeah, that felt good. Okay, what about good old-fashioned gunfights? Oh, you could just see how that felt good to play. What about hacking a security system?
Access granted.
Yes! With less than a second to spare. Okay, well, what about talking your way out of problems?
The call was made. I took the shot. I killed the kid, and nobody else had to carry it. Adam, please. I need to hear you say it wasn't my fault.
Wayne, it was a bad situation. You didn't do anything wrong.
Adam, Thanks. The door's unlocked. I'll tell the guys to let you through. Now, I need to be alone for a while.
Yeah! Yeah, that's kind of a bummer. And not only do all of these mechanics feel great, but the level design facilitates a seamless transition between all of the playstyles at will. Every mission has multiple approaches, alternate pathways, blockades that can be surpassed with the right augmentations. You can and will miss entire sections of a level on your first pass just because of your playstyle and what direction you choose to go. Choosing whether you want to enter the same room through a vent or through a door, this is not. I'm looking in your general direction, Invisible War. The end result, between upgrade pacing, level design, and visceral feel, is a game that shows its developers clearly knew where they wanted to take these mechanics very early on. This team not only understood Deus Ex, but also modern game tropes in general, and how to properly integrate them into the Deus Ex formula to produce something both modern yet true to the original. I mean, they made a better sequel than the original developers did. Remember what that looked like? Unfortunately, all the success they had with their core mechanics makes the boss fights with these three assholes all the more confusing. Yes, despite being able to revive a complex 10-year-old franchise that many thought was effectively dead, the developers decided that once every 2 or so levels, the game needed to regress to arcade game tropes circa 1983 and force you to shoot dead a giant meat sponge of a boss. My current theory as to why is that everyone at Eidos Montreal is a lycanthrope, and every 4 weeks when the full moon shines its curse down upon the blighted land of Quebec, the entire dev team in its bestial, drooling form would go to work, creating the most abysmal, broken, antithetical gameplay possible to undermine the efforts of their alter egos. I can't come up with any other explanation as to why a team this talented and this smart could make a decision this shitty. I mean, let's break this down. 1. Highly lethal gameplay does not facilitate badass boss fights. The fact that both you and your enemies go down quickly facilitates this game's stealth mechanics. You need to respond quickly and avoid being seen lest you be quickly incapacitated, and it allows you to quickly incapacitate others to keep combat brief and localized so that when conflict has to happen it doesn't completely blow your cover. But when your enemy is a meat sponge who is always in hostile mode, it's just a war of attrition. You'll pop off 1 or 2 shots and then run around like an idiot. It's not like there's even the opportunity to sneak up behind them if they've lost you, or get in a few good hits while they reload. They're always on the offensive. You'll die more often in these fights than you will during the rest of the game, simply because there's no real defensive action you can take. It's like being asked to take on a cyber demon as Sam Fisher. The player is simply mechanically ill-equipped to play this new game that's being thrown at them from completely out of nowhere. It's unfun, uninteresting, and uninspired to play through. 2. You have completely subverted the notion of choice. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Freeform choice and solving problems in interesting ways is the heart of the Deus Ex gameplay. This is the antithesis of that. This is like having a theme park where there are rides for all ages and interests, but every 4 hours, everyone in the park is required to ride the Dude Bro Terror Coaster. You've boiled a smorgasbord of gameplay styles down to just one really boring flavor. And God help you if you were playing the game as a pacifist or a stealth guy, because now not only are you Sam Fisher taking on a cyber demon, but now all of your shit is on the other side of the goddamn room. As a result, it's effectively punishing people for taking advantage of the game's biggest strength. If this isn't a werewolf counter-programming move to dissuade people from playing this game, I don't know what is. 3. These fights are completely pointless and vapid. Do you remember the Gunther Hermann fight in the original Deus Ex? Gunther viewed you as a symbol of his obsolescence. He had grotesquely mutilated himself with mechanical augmentations in pursuit of being better at his job. And then you show up with your chiseled face and $1,200 trench coat and barely any metal bits at all. He hated you, but it was because of how you made him feel about himself.
My vision is augmented.
Better to look good than to have the distractions of another agent who needs backup.
And then you went and killed his friend and partner, Anna Navarra. And at that point, it was less about protecting other people's secrets and more about a personal vendetta against you. When you confront Simons after killing Gunther, he basically admits to sending him at you just to get rid of old tech, validating Gunther's fears and providing a great example of how transhumanism could potentially render a man worthless because his augmentations aren't up to snuff.
Next time I won't use an old box of bolts like Gunther. The only reason I let him go to Paris is that I was sick of his moaning about Navarra and constant requests for a tune-up.
You sent him because you knew he would fight to the death.
He was the last of the mechs. Next time you will face someone of your own abilities.
I mean, it wasn't exactly Shakespeare, but there was a lot going on in that fight between two characters that you had an emotional investment in. Now compare that to the fight with the naked muscle man, and how he was real mad at you because you found his room of other naked muscle men, and he needed to stop you because...
All your blundering around and childish interference hasn't stopped a thing.
Well, I guess he didn't need to stop you, but the fight was thematically necessary because it represents...
You've lost her, Jensen. Men like us, we never get back the things we love.
It represents how similar Adam Jensen is to a naked muscle man? The other 3 boss fights are equally pointless, providing basically nothing to the plot and actively detracting from the gameplay. Boss fights aside, though, the game's a wonderful mix of old and new, keeping the concept of objectives you can tackle from various angles, but updating those angles to reflect modern game styles. Unfortunately, the development team's vision with regard to story and thematic content isn't quite as cohesive. People say the game's about transhumanism, but it isn't. Not really. It's about transhumanism in the same way that BioShock is about objectivism. It gets mentioned a lot, and it's the motivation for 1 or 2 of the characters, and it's a superficially deep theme to let mouth-breathing neckbeards think that they're well-read just because they've played a video game. But in reality, it's set dressing. The game has very little of substance to actually say about transhumanism. It's like the team knew they wanted to say something, but everyone thought they were talking about something different. Don't believe me? Well, let's take a look at what the game actually says about augmentations.
You think everyone gets augmented by choice? No. Shit happens. And then what? You're saddled with neuropozyne injections for the rest of your life, and that shit costs money. But what choice do you have? Without the drug, you'll die. Rejection syndrome, crippling pain. That just ain't right.
Oh, so like it's a commentary on our failing healthcare system and how corporations are putting profit ahead of human life and...
I've been a victim of this anti-aug backlash. I was attacked simply for having been to a limb clinic. By people who were not augmented. People with an axe to grind. And do you know who saved me? An augmented man, a stranger. So you tell me where the real danger comes from.
So it's like X-Men, where we have people who have power and people who don't have power, and how do we reconcile these two strata of society?
I just can't subscribe to Taggart's Neanderthal opinions. It's like he thinks human development is a sin.
I can't believe there are still people out there with backward mentalities.
This UN resolution he wants passed is persecution, plain and simple.
I think everyone has the right to their opinion, but bigots like Taggart shouldn't be given a soapbox to stand on.
So being augmented is a metaphor for being gay? That doesn't even make...
He wants to limit you. He wants the government to have jurisdiction over your body. You want to get augmented? Oh, no. I'm sorry, but we're not gonna let you. You're not gonna let me? Ha!
So, it's an allegory for abortion now?
If you do this, the focus of hatred may shift, leaving corporations free to experiment with human evolution. If you do this, enact harsh restrictions on human enhancement research.
So now it's just whether technology good or technology evil. The game mixes metaphors and throws everything it can at us to imply augmentation is a serious socio-political issue, but it doesn't discuss why. Look, if you want to discuss transhumanism, then discuss transhumanism. It's not hard. Just display the pros and cons of augmentations and have the audience make up their own minds. Show someone gaining bionic sight and seeing a loved one for the first time. Follow a military vet as he regains the ability to walk thanks to augmentations. Talk about the nature of transhumanism and the ability to be more than what we are. Not just regular guys with robo-arms, but better artists, better detectives, better lovers, better thinkers. Show us the limits of our biology and how overcoming those limits can make us better people. That would be discussing transhumanism. Then you could talk about the downsides, that a man can be quantifiably compared to another man based on engineering specs, that you're handing over control of your very body to amoral corporations with a profit motive, that corporations will now literally be rewriting the definition of what it means to be human. Human Revolution doesn't really talk about things on those terms. Instead, it says weird stuff like this.
He was augmented, an unknown factor.
Unknown factor? Anyway, this bit at the beginning of Deus Ex says more about transhumanism and augmentation than basically anything in Human Revolution.
That's the difference right there. Just take a look at him.
Bad?
They cut off his arm, replaced half his face.
Herman, right? He's a good soldier. Killed 3 of our men.
They'd have replaced his whole body if it would have improved performance. That's how you judge a man? By performance? Then eventually it's not about people, but upgrades, versions, functionality.
All I know is we could use a few mechs for ops like this.
Soon as we buy into the cult of the machine, we're just like them.
Rhetoric. Always more rhetoric.
And the game desperately needed more of that, and less...
unknown factor.
The dev team also seemed to be unsure of how much of a prequel to Deus Ex they really wanted Human Revolution to be. Ties to the original game exist, but they're either made in passing or completely superfluous. Page Industries is mentioned briefly in the intro.
Well, if he orders one from Page Industries, maybe they'll throw in another cappuccino maker.
VersaLife shows up as a background entity. Joseph Manderley, your boss from the first game, is kept off-screen, but is mentioned in a couple of the missions.
Tell Manderley I didn't get the memo until I was halfway through the autopsy.
You meet Tracer Tong's dad, but they never really come out and say it.
What is it you think Mr. Tong do for you anyway?
And for some reason they only ever use one musical cue from the original soundtrack. You know the UNATCO theme when you're meeting Manderley? Which was then used when meeting David Seraph for the first time.
Gentlemen, how wonderful to see you both. Go right in, Adam. He's waiting.
So out of the entire soundtrack, the only song they felt necessary to bring back was the Meeting Your Boss theme. Finally, I feel I have to cover the endings because I think they're a cop-out for at least a few reasons. First of all, it's kind of an empty choice without consequence. Effectively, the player gets to choose between one of 4 endings. Tell everyone that Hugh Darrow made everyone crazy, and as a result potentially drive away mankind from augmentation research. Insist that it was an anti-augmentation organization that caused the problem, and force everyone to be very pro-augmentation. Cover the whole thing up and protect the Illuminati while promoting some regulation. Or blow up the facility and have mankind make of this mess what it will. Unfortunately, these choices are kinda dumb. I hate to keep bringing it up as an example, but since it did basically all of this much better, I'm going to defer to the original Deus Ex. The whole ending sequence was about the nature of power, government, and technology. Does government exist to provide freedom, or does it exist to take it away? Is exploitation by an elite class inevitable when organizing power structures? How do we choose who is in that elite? Does local government and decentralized technology counteract the power of that elite? I mean, check out this debate between Daedalus and J.C. Denton.
In a society with democratic institutions, the struggle for power can be peaceful and constructive, a competition of ideologies. We just need to put our institutions back in order.
The checks and balances of democratic governments were invented because human beings themselves realized how unfit they were to govern themselves. They needed a system. Yes, an industrial-age machine.
I mean, that's some heady stuff. Now compare that to this exchange between Seraph and Jensen.
Ever since man first crawled out of that ocean, we've been striving to be more than we are. Augmentation technology is just the latest, greatest step on a very long road.
That's your belief, Seraph. Not everyone shares it.
But you do, Adam.
Yeah, Adam. Why don't you support my desire to help human beings in vague ways that I'm never going to fully describe? But the biggest problem with the endings is that there's absolutely no narrative resolution. What happens to the Illuminati after we send our message? What about humanity? Do they listen to my message? Is Megan's research ever rediscovered and widely used? And more to the point, what the hell happens to Megan? I just spent the last 30 hours of my life playing a game in search of this woman, and the last thing I saw of her, she was running away and then completely fell off the plot. I mean, seriously, first you can't tie this game into the original Deus Ex, and now you don't even have the decency to wrap up your narrative with where Megan Reed ended up? Yeah? Secret ending after the credit. God damn it! So yes, there's a secret ending after the credits that's more of an ending to the game than, well, the end of the game. It reveals that Bob Page, the antagonist of the first game, is the man in the intro video, and in a tragic turn of events, Megan is using her research to create what will become the Great Death Plague from Deus Ex. It's actually kind of a cool ending, except it relegates this entire game to the status of a simple side story. It would be like if the prequel trilogies for Star Wars opened like this.
These visions you have, they're of pain, suffering, death.
Then we could follow this asshole around for 3 movies as he gets that bionic eye and does Naboo security stuff. Then after you've spent 12 hours across 3 movies following this guy, at the end of the 3rd movie, after the credits, you could throw this little nugget in there.
Henceforth, you shall be known as Darth Vader.
It renders your choice of ending meaningless when you know the world ends up like it does in Deus Ex regardless, and it makes it seem like all the actual conspiracy stuff was happening elsewhere while you were off killing people in the name of corporate security. Ultimately, the best compliment I can give the game is that it feels like an honest and true sequel to the original Deus Ex, and actually surpasses it in mechanic design in a number of key ways. It's just a shame they couldn't decide what, if anything, they wanted to use those mechanics to say, and instead just sort of kick some ideas around half-heartedly. Hopefully, though, this is the start of a rebirth for the franchise, and we'll see a more cohesive work set in the Deus Ex universe in the future. But seriously, next time narrative closure should not happen after the credits sequence.